Now, whatever.
All right. So this is Chris Bennett here, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Ulrich Norbisrath of Ulno.net and academic acclaim. And I want to express appreciation for him agreeing to be interviewed at this episode of AC&I, Adapt, Create, and Innovate, intended to support creative entrepreneurs in this COVID-19 pandemic economy. And on that point, I want to thank all of the healthcare workers, first responders, and the others who are doing their job so that we can do ours as we shelter in place and try to make the world a better place. So I want to say welcome, Ulrich, and appreciate your engagement.
Thank you for having me here, Chris.
And so how are things in Brazil, by the way?
Yeah, it depends on which news I'm reading. I have to say, personally, I'm doing pretty well, but I'm quarantining very strictly. And yeah, shops are still open. And but the bigger cities are getting in big trouble at the moment. So I think the hospitals are slowly starting to burst. So your appreciation for the healthcare workers I would like to just emphasize here. We're still fine doing here in Brazil, yeah, but if you can believe the news, we haven't even started the first wave yet. And so things can get pretty critical here.
Okay. Well, thank you for that share. And let's segue into something that's near and dear to both of our hearts as we bounce off that COVID-19 point. And that is, give me a soundbite. Considering the fact that you're innovating in this COVID-19 environment, what's your purpose for doing what you do?
As one of the hats I'm wearing is the hat of an educator. What I really like to do is make people curious. And I think in this moment, I want to make people curious about open source.
And thank you for that. And that is a great segue to a topic about which I know that you're passionate, open source, and the potential it has for opening doors. So let's build on that. Related to open source, what's your most outrageously creative moment? What's something that
I have prepared something regarding that, and I hope we can have a little movie prepared for you. So let's switch to that. And as you see, it has to do with coffee. And we don't have any sound. How great is that?
Well, I think the video kind of says it all. As you show that, I'm going to ask, what's your definition of open source?
Let me just do it again, yeah?
Sure.
What about some coffee? Hey Minecraft, turn on the water kettle.
Did you just talk to your coffee pot?
I did just talk to my coffee pot, yes. And you will ask, what does it all have to do with innovation and open source, won't you?
I would, although coffee I think is essential to innovation.
And so what you've seen actually there is me really talking to my coffee pot, or actually to open source voice assistant. So something like Google Home or Alexa or so, but I use actually an open source voice assistant, which doesn't send all my things into the internet and also works without the internet. Okay. And it can, it understands the wake word, hey Mycroft, and then it understands different commands I give after that. And yeah, one of the commands I can give, turn on the coffee machine, or turn on the water kettle, which is the same command, and switches on actually here the water kettle and the coffee machine you have seen next to it. It doesn't hand grind the things, unfortunately, yet.
Not yet, but knowing you and having seen your automation for unlocking your apartment in Arlington, you'll figure a way to do that. And So let's actually step back for a second. When we say open source, what are we thinking? How would you define that?
So the classic definition of open source actually says that it basically says that it is something which is free to distribute. So
Okay.
this element of being free is very important in the open source. And there's a big fight about, is it free, like free in beer, or is it free in free speech? And I think depending on the definition you take, you get something else. But in terms of cost, it's definitely free. So if I talk about open source, it's something which is available for everybody.
Okay.
And then it also allows you to change it. So you're not really owning it, but you own it like you own it in a community. So that is something you can influence. Or interesting in terms of a license perspective, yeah, so something can only be called open source if there's a license which allows you to do modifications.
Okay.
Of course, you can then discuss about attribution and all these things, but this is something you can actually make your own and integrate into your own things. And as I'm a software guy, I really love this idea that I can have something that can be changed. A lot of people think if you talk about open source that it has to do with software, but it doesn't need to necessarily be software. It can also be something regarding hardware, or kind of a recipe, how to build something. So I think it's a bit limiting. So I like to see open source a little bit more global, and also kind of in terms of best practice, how you can do something and share this recipe with others and have a place to modify this recipe and working on that together. Okay. So, and also the community aspect is super important for me in here.
Well, Ulrich, I appreciate that, because one of our missions is to reach out to underserved creative entrepreneurs and to help them to create value in their terms. And what you described to me is free software architecture, as well as hardware architecture and others that they may use to address problems and to create opportunities. So that's pretty interesting stuff. And that begs the question then of, who are you that you are attracted to that capability? You know, what is your organization, Ulno.net, about in doing that?
Yeah, so as I talked about the hats before, I do wear several of them. And so let's actually switch there.
Okay.
When you have learned me, actually learned to know me probably in the last facility I'm mentioning here, you have learned to know me as a geek. But I think a geek is kind of a rich personality, which has a lot of things that it combines.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Ulno.net is basically my brand of my own person. So my idea in life and working is that I want to do things I enjoy doing, and I want to brand me as a person. So what kind of helps my brand is what brings me, or brings Ulno.net forward.
Okay.
And Ulno.net is just, as you see, basically coming out of my name, Ulrich Norbisrath. It's a contraction of the first letters. But the funny thing is, thinking and working with this brand Ulno led to something that most English speakers never could pronounce it correctly. And they pronounce it, you will know. And then we thought, oh, you will know is actually something that totally fits my brand. Yeah, so we can actually, it's a lot about education. Yeah, it can work as Ulno.net. So I see that, or see myself as a platform for people who are interested in technology and want to build projects which might have to do with software, but also might deal with pitching and about how to get a startup running. So in this facility, Ulno.net should be a point of reference, or a point of start for kind of thinking in an intellectual way about your project and getting your project out of off the ground. So, and you can find me in different roles as mainly educator, consultant, and mentor, but I'm also tinkerer and inventor. So I like actually figuring out things which you think are impossible, like how do you get your Mycroft to grind the coffee for you, and actually make that happen. I'm also have started doing a lot of publications on YouTube and feature also you, Chris, there. So I think that is a nice outreach platform, so to present things on YouTube. So you've also find me there. And I like the international, so I want to also be a person who is at home in very different cultures and hopefully can mitigate between these cultures, because I've been living all over the world. It's a little hard to travel at the moment, but I think it would be nice to extend this list of all the different countries I've been working in, and I'm going to. So we just see if the time is right. And there's one thing which is probably also a big connection with Ulno.net. So if you talk to me at one point, you will start talking about Internet of Things. And that's also where the coffee comes into place. So the coffee has actually brought me to the Internet of Things, because I use a device which is called the ESP8266. And there's one development board of the ESP8266, which is called the Espresso Light, done by this lovely guy up there in the corner. So coffee, Internet of Things, and open source is what I am about.
So, Ulrich, thank you for that. And that kind of leads us to the next question. And let me say, the Capitol Fringe in DC.
You cut out. Can you repeat what you to the next question?
Yeah, I was saying that you've developed an Internet of Things device for a play in which I participated in Washington, D.C. And you've also done a number of things. And I see that you have a PhD in home automation. So is your education the source of your innovation inspiration, or is there something else?
Yes is one of the answers, but yes is also the answer to is there something else? And I was already on this slide. And so this element of creativeness, working with people, is and kind of behaving in an open source way is also a source of this innovation. So not everybody, so when I talked about the definition of open source, I still owe you some examples. I think one of the most famous examples for open source might be Linux. So most people in this world might have heard about Linux, and the mascot of Linux is this penguin up there.
Penguin, yes.
Yeah, lots of people know about Firefox, so that's another big thing, which is open source. But if you have started, so I'm involved in a couple of open source projects. You have heard one, which is Mycroft. So this is this privacy aware voice assistant. And you adopt a specific way of working if you work a lot with open source. If you try to make things work with free software, but so some things are a bit harder than with commercial software. But however, this way of changing things and giving things back, that changes the way you work. So in that, this way it binds together and also being the inspiration for the innovation I create.
Well, Ulrich, it's interesting that you say that, because when I think about how does that all come together to create value in your terms, there are many factors: education, experience, natural curiosity, teaching acumen. So could you take that and put it in your terms? How does all those things come together to create value?
So of course there's different values. So one of the things there is monetary value, and we have often talked about the Red Hat example and shown that even if Red Hat is based on something which is basically free, there is a possibility to earn money and support a lot of people and to make a living out of there. And basically now Linux is running 99% of the internet.
Okay.
So, and there's a lot of business who create money out of the internet. So this is one value. So there's definitely a monetary value you can create. But we've also talked a lot about communities, and because open source can support so many things in the community without people having to invest a lot of money. So I'm working a lot with artists who usually have to pay enormous amounts of money to Adobe to get started, or they have to just pirate content to get started. But if I want to set them on a legal path and be creative, I can show them actually tools from the open source area where they can do, can achieve very similar results without having this high startup fee. And there, in the Internet of Things, there are a lot of possible projects where you can build something small out of these very affordable hardware now, which directly benefit your community. So the payment there might be more appreciation, which we scientists really like a lot, than actual money. So but the nice thing is, often you invest for a long time in some kind of project, and then at one point you see, hey, that can actually transfer right into a business. Or you have helped a student, and the student says, hey, you have helped us set up this business, so maybe you should be shareholder of this thing. And so I think there's the direct way to value, but there are a lot of other ways and a lot of different values you can actually get here.
Well, I appreciate that description of how it creates value in your terms. And speaking of your terms, from what you're seeing and hearing about this COVID-19 environment, do you have any coping words or suggestions you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I hope when maybe the all-rounding thing is don't lose your spirit, don't lose your ability to laugh. But so I came up with the 4 C's. So the 4 C's for me to cope with COVID is actually coding, coffee, cooking, and communication.
Okay.
So I do, because as a geek, as a coder, staying at home is one of the lesser punishments you can get.
Well said.
And coffee for your inspiration is still something. So as you see, I have to manually grind, but I get a good coffee in return. So that's something I can still do. So which leads directly to cooking. So I enjoy still the good food you can still get. And if you have the resources to some food you can turn into something you can enjoy, do it. And communication is, reach out in all the new ways that are possible. Use open source software to stay in touch with with the people you like. So you want to definitely check out Jitsi, which is one of the things I use as a Zoom alternative. And and use it as an opportunity to discover new things and never lose your smile.
All right. Well said, well said. Which leads us to the next to last question. What's next for you and for Ulno.net?
Yeah, I have tried to use this situation to come up with my own coping strategies, which basically meant I dig into even more projects than I did before and build up new ways of communication with people. So I have several small series in terms of doing outreach in YouTube at the moment. So there's an open source, open doors with open source series I'm doing at the moment, and I did a pitch with Chris. And so I encourage everybody to watch and demand more and give feedback if that is a format people like. I'm also planning a short series about technology, and I've very briefly showed one of these ESP devices here. So this is this $1 computer I also showed to Chris right in the start.
Right.
And you can put that into everything. So you can come up with some fantastic projects I've never thought about, the one of them is kind of, yeah, getting your coffee prepared a little quicker. But I think if you have the right minds working with these devices, you might come up with some very, very interesting ideas, and encouraging that is something I want to do. And so the idea is that I have a couple of shorts where I just talk 5 minutes, just the length of one coffee,
Okay.
about these type of technology things. And I'm basically gathering ideas at the moment, what other kind of gadgets I could talk about. And I'm very happy to start making these short videos about it. And I hope this will be a success to have this video series running.
Well, I can definitely see how knowing how someone can take that chip and using open source can create technology-enabled art, where a spoken word performer could interact with a device, or healthcare, which a class I'm teaching, or I was teaching, they're coming up with a way to better serve the financially disadvantaged. You have any thoughts on that? How to use that tech?
Yeah, I mean, again, so exposing yourself to, so first, this tech is really affordable. And so if you go to my website, you find actually a couple of things of different types of kits you can start for getting into this tech. So I would actually, if you want to make a project, I would kind of see if you can get your hands on a couple of these kits, or get the kit yourself, and then follow some of this content and actually expose yourself and build any small project. So we have once thought about building a rain sensor for monitoring floodwater in the city, but there are countless other projects you can do. So if you have a teacher who actually has a project he likes, you can use that to inspire people. And then maybe if you make people experience that they can actually, with very little effort, create change, then maybe this can lead to bigger projects I cannot foresee here at the moment. There's one thing in my future, which I should mention here, which I just forgot, is in half a year, I will go back to being a full-time university professor in Estonia. So there's also, of course, something I have to prepare here in actually getting there, which basically means getting all the projects I'm working on kind of a little bit round up and get some life into them that they are going, and maybe finding enough people who kind of give me appreciation to get even more projects out there.
Well, thank you for that, and congratulations on that appointment in Estonia. Well deserved. And so, to bring our interview to a close, any parting words of wisdom that you like to share with anyone that might be in the audience or in the world?
First, of course, don't lose your mind about what is going on at the moment. See if there is some kind of opportunity, if it's a learning opportunity, or is it a getting in touch with people you always wanted to get in touch opportunity, then take it. If the person you want after this to get in touch with should be me, please head over to ulno.net or to youtube.ulno.net and start leaving some comments. So maybe there are some projects I haven't thought about, and maybe we can get them running.
Excellent, excellent. Spoken like a true socially engaged, globalist, very knowledgeable geek.
Thank you. I like to see me that way.
So, Ulrich, thank you so much for sharing your time with our audience and your expertise. And good fortune to you, and be well in Brazil. And my best to everyone in your community.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris, for having me here.
Thank you. Take care.